Welcome to the original Gangsters Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein. Very special edition. We love celebrating the OGs, both sides of the law. We have a particular proclivity to tipping the hat to the great mob busters of the 20th century and guys that are willing to come on and share their experiences and exploits. And then when those people also are Renaissance men and also, wade into more creative endeavors like our guest today. We want to help promote all of their achievements, both as members of law enforcement and now as, artists and authors. So we have Anthony Pesare, one of the great mob busters in the history of Rhode Island. The patriarch of crime family, was a heavyweight in the Rhode Island State Police and was at the forefront of cracking the Dickie Cali murder and putting Bobo Maripesci away for quite a while. Anthony, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Scott.
It's
a pleasure to be on.
We're really excited to get into talking about your career and your current authoring. Just to let people know, Anthony is releasing his second crime fiction book, which is, we can say based or loosely based on your career.
Yeah, they both are. Yeah.
And this is the second book, and it follows a protagonist, Gino Peterson, who is a mob buster. And one of the antagonists in these stories is a character based on Bobo Maripesci, one of the most notorious and feared mobsters in New England history. And the recent release is called Back in the Game, and we'll let everybody know how we can consume that by the end of this podcast. But Anthony, let's just first start by talking.
Sure.
How did you get inspired to start authoring from the career that you come from law enforcement?
Yeah. So the reason I got involved and decided to write was that I had just finished the Bobo Maripesci case where he was found guilty of first-degree murder. And I knew there was a story there, and the story had to do with, and I made it a work of fiction because I wanted to talk about growing up Italian as a young man and then going on the state police and being sent to the intelligence unit. And first of all, let me say that nobody does anything alone in law enforcement. So I had a lot of help and a lot of people along the way. So anyway, it was unusual growing up Italian and wanting to be a state trooper, because just like everybody else in an Italian neighborhood, I saw the wise guys walking up and down the street. Jerry Wilmette come up the street, and everybody would go to hide because he was so feared. So I lived that, and but on the other hand, I wanted to get into law enforcement. So I was lucky enough to get on the state police in the early 70s. And after about 5 years on Rhode, I was able to get transferred into the intelligence unit. I went up there specifically because the state police had 3 witnesses in protective custody. And these were associates of Bobo Maripesci. And we had them in our own kind of protective custody, almost a witness protection program. And for the time we had them, we made cases against the patriarch of crime family, robberies and all kinds of crimes that they were involved in. But the biggest was the murder of Richard Dickie Cali, who was a made guy. And it's very unusual, obviously, for a made guy to be hit without permission of the boss. And so from talking to these witnesses, we learned that Dickie Cali was supposedly running the mob in Rhode Island while Patriarch Senior was in prison.
And this was just to give people some proper background knowledge. This is spring of 1975.
Exactly.
And Bobo Maripesci is running what was kind of known as the Acorn Social Club crew.
Right.
And Dickie Cali, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he more, he represented a different crew. He wasn't part of Bobo's crew.
Yeah, and they didn't get along. They never did. they always clash. There was an instance where Dickie Cali's brother went into the bar, and Bobo either threw him out or they got into an argument, and he was offended. Dickie Cali was offended by that, and he went to Nikki Biano and he said, you need to put a chain on this dog. So there was a lot of animosity between the two. So in 1975, Bobo got permission to kill Dickie Cali, and he killed him in 75 on St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
Yeah. So Dickie Cali walks into the Acorn Social Club in enemy territory all by himself, and he's shot, stabbed, and brought up to Rehoboth, Massachusetts, and buried there. So a case that was started in 1975, now we fast forward to the 80s when I'm up there and witnesses come forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so we put the case together. And as a result of that, we were able to convict him of first-degree murder. But I think the real education for Anthony Pesare and for the state police was practically living with 3 mob associates and getting to know what it was like for their lives, and they got to know about our lives. And one of the things that was interesting to me was, I think there are certain similarities between law enforcement and wise guys. We've talked about.
I've found that in my 17, 18 years, that especially when you reach the highest level of both.
Exactly.
There's a similar mindset. It's just whether or not you're going to use it for good or bad.
Or evil. Yeah. So police crave promotion, and so do mobsters. And they crave notoriety. Like, they want to walk into a restaurant and sit right down. They want to walk into a nightclub and get the best seats. Well, in many ways, police officers are the same way. And sometimes, as you say, as you get higher and higher on this ladder, you're recognized wherever you go, and benefits flow from that. And also, lobsters lead a dangerous life, obviously. They don't know whether they're going to be involved in a crime or get shot by the police. And it's the same for the police, that they say, same dangers they face daily. So it was kind of a dichotomy that I wanted to explore. So that's why I wrote the book. The first book is called They Always Win. They Always Win. And I self-published it. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Indigo. And what I did was to take my life experiences growing up and also living with these 3 individuals, and I fictionalized it. So one of the things I talked about is, and this is a true story, when I was young, we had bookies, we had guys hanging on the corner. Well, a bookie came to me and he said, listen, I had probably 11, 12 years old. I was riding a bike. I remember that. He said, hey, I want you to take this package up to the store at the end of the street. So I pedal my little bike and I hand it off. I come back, he gives me like a $10 bill. All right. That was like handing somebody a $100 bill back then. So I do it like 2 or 3 times. And so, like a kid with a lot of money, I stopped buying baseball cards with a gum inside. And my mother sees it and she said, where are you getting the money to do this? I said, well, Ernie, Ernie, Sylvia's cousin, I just drive up, I bring a package. And she goes, what? She said, that ends today, young man. And then Ernie made the mistake of coming over to visit his cousin. We lived in a triple-decker. And my mother heard him at the door, and she came down, and I never saw a mobster scared of a woman like that in my entire career. He was just petrified because in the neighborhood policed itself. And her message to him was, no, he's not going down that road. So that was my short-lived life as a gangster.
Do you mind, before we get to the meat and potatoes of how you made the case?
Okay.
Do you mind if we drill down a little bit on some of the particulars? I've got some notes.
Okay.
And I've written at some point in the last decade. I've written about this homicide, the Dickie Cali homicide, and some of the background to it. I think my writings about this came around the time that Bobo Maripesci passed away. in 2017, and we were doing a lot of kind of legacy stuff. So Maripesci has the Acorn Social Club.
It was actually in his father's name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Raymond, old man Raymond Patriarca is away, and as you said, you have Maripesci and Dickie Cali kind of jockeying for who's going to be running Rhode Island, Federal Hill, and Providence and whatnot. The crew that was around Bobo Maripesci were a group of, pretty serious individuals with pedigrees, and it was a ragtag group of, like the Wild Bunch, or a group of like a rogues gallery.
They were a rogues gallery, absolutely.
Some of these guys that you might know: Billy Blackjack Del Santo, Chippy Chavola. Name that we'll hear about more very soon: Richie Moon, Diorio, Little Frankie Martellucci, Big John Chacoian, Billy Furley. These were the guys that were hanging out at the Acorn Social Club on a regular basis and running rackets with Bobo Maripesci, Frank Maripesci, aka Bobo. At some point in early 1975, there's an issue between Chacoian, Big John Chacoian, and a main guy in the patriarchal crime family, Alfred Lepori, who they call Keystone Al. And I think there were threats back and forth between them. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you and your family. And the Maripesci crew kills Lepori, who Dickie Cali, I guess, was close with. And this kind of sets up a situation where the Maripesci crew, and correct me anytime if I'm getting something.
No.
The Maripesci crew thinks that they kind of got to kill Dickie Cali to prevent him from seeking retribution on behalf of one of his guys.
And the reason for the power struggle is that Dickie Cali was a made member of organized crime.
Right.
And Bobo at this point was only an associate.
Okay.
He had his own crew. It was part of the Mafia, but he hadn't been made. So he wasn't a made guy. So he wasn't on equal footing with Dickie Cali. And so when Senior was away, Nikki Biano was the underboss, and he had to negotiate and keep these two away from each other. The downfall of Dickie Cali was that he started misbehaving. He started drinking and doing drugs. And at one time, there's a rule that civilians, people who go about their business every day, are not harmed. Well, an old man was in a phone booth, if anybody remembers what a phone booth is. And Dickie Cali wanted to make a call, so he grabbed the guy and kind of gave him a beating, and used the phone. So that got back to Nikki Biano. And I think as a result of that, they gave Bobo permission to take him out. So as well as the clash of the two crews, so to speak, there was also this agreement that Cali had to go.
And Maripesci and Chacoian, Martellucci, is it Little Frankie Martellucci?
Mattie Googli.
And Richie Moon, they lure Cali to the club under the Acorn Club under the pretense that they're gonna put their differences aside.
Actually, the way the witnesses, the three witnesses, Billy Furley, Mattie Martellucci, and Richard Diorio, the way it was explained to us was that it was St. Patrick's night and he just wandered in.
Okay, so maybe I have the notes wrong here. This was March 15th. No, I'm going to believe me that my research can't hold a candle to somebody that actually investigated it.
So
this was March 15th, 2000, or sorry, March 15th, 1975.
Yeah, and he walks into the social club. It's late, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's dressed like in green, a green suit, green check, like St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And they're aghast that he had the balls to come into that social club when they knew they were at odds with each other. So Bobo tells Frank Montalucci to go out to the car and bring in a gun. It was a 22, I believe. Might have been a 38. Frank gives him the gun, and Bobo's behind the bar, and he puts a drink in front of Cali, and he says, "This is on the house as a sign of respect in hopes that we'll get along." So Dickie takes the drink. Bobo comes around the bar, puts his hand on the shoulder, and fires like 6 shots into his back.
Wow. That's pretty cold-hearted, but that's how that's par for the course when it comes to LCN. And as we've talked about quite a bit here at OG Pod, New England was a particularly vicious group.
Yes.
They were people from New England, I think kind of like where I'm from Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
They're known as, and this is I'm saying this complimentary. I mean, they're known as rugged souls. There's a certain toughness that's kind of bred into you when you grow up in certain parts of the country, and sometimes that bleeds over into the way they work with in the rackets, and they might be viewed in certain parts of historical legacy or whatever. People look at anything outside of New York as lesser than
the minor leagues.
And I'm telling you, that could not be further the truth when you're talking about the patriarchal group, who could go toe to toe with anybody in the viciousness department, in the earning department, in the corruption department. They were vertically integrated early on in this life,
and they were respected by the 5 families in New York. Raymond was beloved Raymond Sr. by the 5 families. In fact, they would reach out to him if they had a dispute amongst themselves. So he was very well respected. In fact, when they wanted to eliminate Junior Patriarca as head of the family, the 5 families refused.
Right.
They said he could step down, but he wasn't to be harmed. Well, that was respect for his late father.
Yeah. Well, they were making a lot of noise in '89, and summer of '89, things got really bad, and people were being killed and shot at. And as Anthony pointed out, at some point that fall, the powers that be in Boston, J.R. Russo and his guys, were called to a meeting with John Gotti and the guys in New York, and told to pump the brakes. It was a meeting or as a wedding, I believe, that they were both at in Long Island or maybe Staten Island. And there was a meeting between J.R. Russo and Gotti said, enough is enough. And like you said, you're going to let him live. There was a pretty quick, in terms of the murder, we're talking about Dickie Cali here. It was a pretty quick recovery of the body. They took him to a golf course.
In Rehoboth,
Massachusetts. But within a day, they found the body, right?
Well, that night, what happened was there was a young patrolman who was patrolling Rehoboth, and he noticed there was a place that was known as a lover's lane. People would drive down there, but also occasionally they would drive and leave stolen cars there. So he's on his post. It starts to snow, and he sees trail of tire prints heading back into the woods. So he said, I'm going to check this out because it could be a stolen car or whatever. So he drives down, doesn't see anything. He tries to do a U-turn and turn around, and he gets stuck. He gets out of his car, pops the hood, the trunk. He wants to get some chains to put under the tires, and he looks down and he sees a trail of blood. He follows the trail of blood, and he sees where it had snowed. In this particular portion, it was sunken down. So he takes the tire iron and he hits the ground, and it sinks right in. So he knows there's something on, and so that body was dug up and crime scene established in the early morning hours of the murder.
So at the end of the day, when it's reaching your desk and you're starting to dig into it, and this is years later in the 1980s, there was a bust of the crew, an unrelated bust that put some of these guys behind bars that were part of Bobo Maripesci's inner circle, related to some type of heist in New Bedford, Mass.
Well, there was a couple of incidents. The one that started the ball rolling in the 80s, which led to his conviction, was there was a union president in Fall River that wasn't going to agree with a contract that was good for the company, but not good for the workers. Mm-hmm. And so Bobo, who had control of that particular union, sent Frank Martellucci and a second individual, Albino Focarelli.
Albie
Focarelli, yeah. So they go up and they baseball bat the guy. But Einstein Martellucci drives his own car up there. Someone gets some registration.
Yeah.
Listen, these guys aren't going to Mensa meetings for the most part. Right. So he drives back with his own car. So they're on the plate, comes back to Martellucci, and Providence police get together. Well, who's Martellucci's right-hand man? It's Diorio. He always goes, but he didn't go that night. So he gets arrested for it. And they go to trial. And he they offer him a plea. He's in his 50s now. They offer him a plea like 5 years if he pleads. And he wants to plead because he didn't do it. He'll do the time. But Martellucci insists on a trial, and Bobo makes the decision, no, you're going to go to trial. So they both go to trial, both found guilty. They get these harsh, long sentences, like 15, 20 years. And so Moon sits in his cell for a couple of years saying, I'm going to die here. I'm going to die. What can I do to get out? And this is kind of ingenious. He knows everything about the murder that night because he hangs around with, but he wasn't there. But he contacts the state police and tells the state police that if they get him out of jail, he can give them the Dickie Callady murder. So that's when he gets taken into protective custody.
So Richie Moon Diorio is the first domino to go, and then that leads to Martellucci and Billy Furley.
Yeah. So as we would pick them up and interview them and start to follow them and put the heat on them, finally when we bring Martellucci in, he said, "Listen, he wasn't even there. So what he's telling you is bullshit. I was there." And the same thing with Furley. Furley was a family man more than anything. He was a wannabe gangster. Tiger Boletto was his uncle, and he looked up to him as a father figure. When Tiger died, I think he thought Bobo was that father figure that he missed out on his youth. So he ended up coming in the same thing, folding right away. And so they ended up testifying against Bobo.
And Bobo gets convicted and does time, comes out, but then goes back in and dies serving another sentence for I think a bookmaking case, extortion case.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a RICO case.
Yeah,
after the murder conviction, yes.
What were your impressions of outside of the kind of regular adjectives that we would describe Bobo Maripesci? Can you kind of go a little bit deeper in what you saw when you were investigating him?
Yeah, he was a very interesting individual. There was a good side of him where he did acts of kindness and charity type things, but then there was the dark side. I remember once we picked him up. Major Benjamin wanted to speak to him because he had a threat against him, and he said, we bring him up there, and Bobo was standing there. The major said, "Look, we're obligated to let you know we've received some information that someone's going to try to kill you." And he laughs. He said, "Major, the only thing I would be worried about would be if I was in prison. And you know why?" And the major says, "Why?" He says, "Because when you walk into the electric chair, over the top of it, it says you can be sure if it's Westinghouse." And so we take him back. But what separates him from you and I would be the fact that he got into not even an argument. It was a New York system wiener place,
Yeah.
on Smith Street, and there was two young kids. They were cocked, and they started exchanging words with him and Furley. Well, the two guys drive away, and
Yeah.
Lobo drives away, and instead of just going home, one of the kids was really a hothead. He gets out of the car, stops the car, gets out of the car, and holds a baseball bat. And so Bobo, like, he snapped. Billy Furley said he turned into this murderer, got out of the car, took the baseball bat away from him, and beat him to death.
Yeah.
Now, Bobo will tell you that Furley did that, not him.
Right. There was they're
It's
pointing
pretty,
fingers at each other. This was
yeah,
back in 82, I think, 1982.
yeah. But, Bobo said, um, I will not plead guilty to that. I would plead guilty to the rest of this stuff, but I'm not pleading guilty to that because I didn't do it. So, I mean, it just shows you. And then he, they murdered someone, stabbed him, brought him to the back of the New Farm Supper Club in Warwick, threw the body in the back, went into the restaurant, and Bobo had meal and peas. Like, he was just sitting down at a Sunday dinner.
Yeah.
But I know he helped a lot of people. And
So was Ronnie, the guy's name was Ronnie McElroy. Was the name of the guy that got beat to death.
Ronnie, the McElroys, yeah. Yep.
And
there were two brothers.
And Bobo served 26 years on the Cali murder, came out in 08, and then went back in 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah. He was found not guilty of the McElroy homicide. He was found not guilty. He was found not guilty on the moron was his nickname.
Oh yeah, Anthony Mirabella.
Anthony Mirabella, not guilty on that. And the third and last case was the Dickie Cali case. We convicted him of that.
Okay. Do you remember the around this time the Slick Vecchio?
Yes.
That was around the same time as Mirabella, I believe.
Right. Yeah. I didn't have anything to do with that investigation, but yeah, he was another tough guy, wise guy that.
Any investigation into Kevin Hanrahan?
No, I wasn't involved in that.
So besides Bobo, who are some of the wise guys in Providence or throughout Rhode Island that you were, that you were chasing around and trying to make cases against?
Yeah. So it was Bobo Maripesci, Billy Blackjack Del Santo, Mattie Googli was an up and comer.
He's an OG now, man.
He's an OG. Yeah, now. We're all OGs at this point.
Yeah.
It was people like that. Junior was in the periphery. I did some work on investigating him when he lived in Lincoln. I'm trying to think that there was.
Talked about Nikki Biano a little bit, and we were saying about how guys that from New York had a lot of respect and reverence for the guys in New England. It wasn't necessarily something where they looked down on them. I know Nikki Biano was a guy that was Raymond's kind of go-to to go back and forth to New York and
Yeah.
represent Raymond to the guys in New York, and Nikki Biano was considered like a button in both areas.
Yeah. Nikki Biano, interesting. We brought a case against him that didn't go anywhere. He was a typical old school gangster, always dressed neat as a pin, was respectful even when you questioned him or even when we arrested him, always very respectful. You never heard about him getting out of line or, doing something crazy. But he was a very valuable right hand to the senior.
Billy Blackjack is he passed away in the last 5-6 years, I believe. But he's a very compelling figure because of his connections into the local government and Buddy Cianci and
Yeah,
City Hall.
yeah, he was a city sidewalk inspector,
Right.
and they had a scam going where they had their own construction crews going, and they worked with a guy. It was called Buckles Melise because he would go up with the illegal loads and get the load would get charged to the city of Providence, and supposedly the sign was he would go to his belt and flash his buckle, and the guy at the gate would let him in. So I mean, they had every scam going you could think of. But Billy Blackjack was known for his gambling, and but very low key. We would stop and talk to him and talk about his family and things like that. I never got the impression that he was a violent guy.
He took over, from what I can understand, he took over Acorn Social Club from Bobo.
Oh,
that he became the skipper at that point.
Okay, I wouldn't know that.
Any observations or interactions you can recall with Mattie Googli? Mattie, who's really the only one that we're talking about that's still active and alive and making moves, and he's pushing 80. Has a series of health issues over the years that he keeps kind of bouncing back from, but I know he's walking with a cane now. He had you look at him in those pictures and videos from the 70s and 80s, he looks like such a baby.
Yeah, it looks like John Travolta.
Right.
Yeah.
And now got him gray and hunched over, walking with a cane. Maybe not hunched over, but having to walk with a cane doesn't really. Those images don't necessarily jive. But you know what they say: Mother Nature, Father Time. They're undefeated.
Undefeated. So Mattie was someone so in the intelligence unit is exactly what it said. You not only make arrests, you gather intelligence on people. So we knew that Mattie was very, very strong in the Johnston area. But those were his guys, and that's where he operated, in that area, down in Johnston. But yeah, he was a made guy too.
His dad was one of Raymond's lieutenants. I believe there's a famous. You just mentioned Johnston. I believe there's a famous FBI photo of Guglielmetti with John Gotti in Johnston.
Oh, really? Okay.
Coming out of a restaurant.
Not aware of that. Johnston was where all the upper echelon of the mob lived. It was always the worker bees that had to stay in Providence, but they would live in Johnston, Cranston, just over the line, out of the sight of the Providence police.
Right.
Less heat. So there was a lot of them that lived. But Mattie was strong in Johnston, no doubt about it.
I think it had to do with Kenny Gorino. Do you remember him?
Yeah, Kenny Gorino was
a porn guy that a lot of people had a piece of, and he was kind of being shared between the Providence guys and New York guys.
He had a factory where he manufactured pornography and other things in the Silver Lake section. I think it was on Dorchester Avenue and Laurel Hill Avenue. And Frank Montelucci worked for him.
Okay.
Yeah, Frank Montelucci worked for him.
And then it came out later that Gorino was a cooperator, and the reason they were able to bug some of the meetings with Cadillac Frank Salemi when he took power in the 90s, he was doing business with the Gambinos, and this was kind of like what I was just talking about, how Mattie would kind of operate Gorino and kind of move him from place to place, like so everybody could take their cut of him.
Yeah.
So Gorino, I think there was a debate about who was going to have rights to him for a certain deal. Was it going to be the Gambinos? Was it going to be the Patriarchos? Was it going to be both of them? And they bugged the Hilton, the Logan Hilton,
Right. Yeah.
and they had the
It's funny.
Gambinos meeting with Cadillac Frank.
I was just going to point out that things there was an old G when I started named Peanuts Broccoli. It was a little
Right.
guy.
Yeah, a little guy.
Broccoli. But his reputation was that he would do as much time as he needed to. He would not say anything. He would plead. You could beat him, kill him, whip him. He wasn't going to say anything. Along comes RICO, the RICO statute.
Yeah.
And now guys fold like cheap suits.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at years and years and years. And it really changed the face of organized crime. And I think it's one reason that organized crime isn't as powerful as it used to be. I think RICO, people don't want to do those kind of numbers. They just don't want to do it.
And it took a little while for the government to understand how to apply it.
Yep.
And then in your neck of the woods, they were they were pioneering and going after someone like Buddy Cianci with the RICO law.
Yeah.
Applying it, taking it from gangsters and applying it to politicians, which then other federal prosecutors have done in other parts of the country, including here in Detroit. They took down our mayor, Kwame Kilpatrick, with the RICO.
They use it against police departments. Like if a shift is taking money, they indict the whole shift of RICO. It's been used against governments. Yeah, it was written by a law professor from Notre Dame. Yeah. And as you said, the prosecutors didn't know what to do with it when they first got it. But boy, once they got it, really
it took them about 10 years.
Oh, easy.
You're like, whoa, this is a real weapon. This isn't just this isn't an appetizer. This is a full meal. This is Thanksgiving dinner. This is Christmas dinner, not just the yams.
What it allows you to do is attack the organization instead of the individual. So you would never get a boss giving the nod to kill someone and have the killer testify against the mobster. And it's never going to happen. So all you could ever have would be like a conspiracy case. Never happened. But once RICO came along, you attack that organization. Everyone from top to bottom, as you know, is responsible for every crime.
Yep.
Every crime.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
Oh, yeah.
I'm interested from more of a macro than micro, or I guess maybe it's both.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting to me in certain parts of the East Coast that's different than the Midwest was the multi-agency approach to organized crime. The people and even today in the 2020s, the Rhode Island State Police go after organized crime there as hard, if not harder, than the feds. So if you're a criminal, you have to keep your head on a swivel. And at one point in time in Chicago and in Detroit, there were local investigations, but at a certain point, starting, I would say, like in the 70s, there was none of these guys were ever having to worry about the Illinois State Police or the Michigan State Police. All they had to worry about was the FBI. But now, and that was 50 years ago. I'm talking about, but now I know the Rhode Island State Police, and we just talked about Mattie Googli and Mattie, and this is not a secret. This isn't pulling a cat out of the bag. He's been under investigation by Rhode Island State Police and the FBI in narcotics investigations the last couple of years. We know that from court filings. So the Rhode Island State Police in 2025 are very active. Can you kind of talk about the impetus you guys have from a state police perspective to kind of to equal the arsenal that's coming from the feds that might be different in your neck of the woods as it is in others?
Yeah, I think it starts with Colonel Stone when he was the superintendent of the state police, because he knew about organized crime. He knew it existed, and he made sure that his state troopers were not corrupted. So I think the best way to think about it is Rhode Island back in the 70s and 80s. There were really three bases of power. It was the Catholic Church,
Mhm.
it was the government, and it was organized crime. And it was like three concentric circles, always butting heads. I think so. The colonel was aware of it, so I think he wanted to investigate organized crime. He testified before Congress, because people said it didn't even exist. And so I think that's what started the momentum towards investigating organized crime. And with the help of the FBI and other agencies, there was momentum. The problem is the FBI's kind of pivoted towards terrorism. And
Yeah.
so now outfits like the state police and the Providence police, who have had intelligence units forever and ever, they absorb the burden of it, so to speak. And the other thing that I think law enforcement battles against, especially when we talk about traditional organized crime, is that they've returned to the basics.
Yep.
They've returned to gambling, loan sharking, things that they have done, the lifeblood of
Drugs.
organized crime.
Yeah.
And it's not
Yeah.
narcotics. Yeah. Narcotics is interesting because what was going on in New England, the patriarchal crime family, you couldn't deal in drugs, but you could insure the load.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You could tax it.
Yeah, you could tax it and make sure that it got from point A to point
Yeah.
B. So you could say, oh, no, we're not involved in drugs, but you're making money off drugs.
Which is what Googli and Mattie went away for 10 years.
Yes, exactly.
Protecting through his Teamster connections, protecting a load of cocaine that was coming through the region. What kind of work were you doing? Did you have a relationship with the Massachusetts State Police? Because you're both working the same organization. And just like in Rhode Island, Massachusetts has a state police that's very active in their organized crime assault.
Yeah, we work with them. It's a great outfit, the Massachusetts State Police. The problem for me when I was working is that the FBI was in a pitched battle with the Massachusetts State Police because of Whitey Bulger.
Yeah.
And it was impossible to get those two groups together. So although they were a resource for us, most of their activity centered around Boston and, button heads with the FBI. So Mass State Police have a very robust intelligence unit.
What were do you have any, obviously you didn't work Bulger from a direct perspective, but do you remember what your opinion was as a investigator in that region of the kind of impunity that Bulger was, he was running roughshod through that entire region for 20 years, and it didn't seem like there was anything that could stop him. Was there you and your guys in Rhode Island making note of that, or was that not on your radar?
Oh yeah, every time. So we would exchange intelligence with Mass State Police because organized crime in New England, the base of it, the headquarters was Boston until Petrarca Sr. moved here to Providence. So now the power base is back up there. So there was always this intelligence, and I recall the frustration that many of the detectives had is like every move we make, it gets short-stopped. Every move we make. So they knew something was rotten. It just took a long time to get to it,
there was I've mentioned this before, but you probably haven't heard it, so I want to tell it to you. So I apologize to the viewers that have heard me tell this story before. But I always want to shout out my hometown and give props to the feds in Detroit that have always been very good to me and did an excellent job working a very difficult syndicate like the Detroit Toko's really crime family that are just really the outliers, and they're all educated and intermarried and very dialed into aspects of crime that other crime families are just, they're light years in front of other crime families. So it's very difficult from a perspective of law enforcement to bust these guys. And as a result, there's only been a few big busts in history. And most of these guys die peacefully in their homes, very, very rich, but also the top suspects in dozens and dozens of murders.
Yeah.
Saying that, Bulger was in Detroit in the mid 70s.
Really?
working with the Detroit guys, fixing horse races. And the federal government in Detroit was ready to bring him in on a big case in 78 or 79. And if they would have, he would have gone away for 10 years, 15 years. And who knows what would have happened with all those bodies that came after that. And the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit got their knees cut off by the Boston FBI, who came in and said, you ain't charging them.
That's an absolute
Yeah.
large stain on the FBI.
Right. And be like, wow, what if you could have locked this guy up in 79 or 80, how many lives could you have?
I know. But I have to say, I spent 2 years on a money laundering task force with the FBI, and what they offer is tremendous resources.
Yeah.
And what do you
Uncle
need?
Sam has
exactly.
Pockets. It's like a black hole in a good way that it never ends.
I used to say that. I used to say the FBI and the feds are like a steamroller. If they catch your pant leg, forget it.
Yeah.
You're gone.
Well, I think the connection between Detroit and the Patriarchas was that Old Man Patriarcha and Old Man Zerilli were both big in the horses. And you guys had Suffolk Downs, and some other places. And we had the Hazel Park Racetrack, which was one of the elite horse racing facilities in the Midwest. And I think there was quite a bit of crossover. And that's why Bulger was in town at that time.
Yeah.
And was fixing races to the point where Vegas was taking the Detroit, the time when this was going on. It got to be such a known thing in the world of horse racing that Vegas was pulling the races off the board. There's too much manipulation going on in those stables. But so just tell everybody where they can find your writing and anything else that you're eager to promote. Let everybody know.
Okay, thank you. So my first book is called They Always Win. It's available at Barnes & Noble online, Amazon online, Indigo online. And if you ask your bookstore, they will be more happy to order it for you. The second book is called Back in the Game. Came out in November. It's an extension of the first, the Gino Peterson story. Again, it has to do with the same characters. And that's also available Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Indigo, and local bookstores. I'm working on the third book. It's called Murder in the Park, and it's based on a true story. And I hope you'll have me back on to talk about that.
You're welcome anytime you want to come back. And I have to tell everyone that maybe don't understand the way the book publishing world works. If you're a published author from a big time publishing house and you sell 10,000 books, that's considered good. And Anthony sold 10,000 books on his own, self-publishing it. So it shows you what a work of art this is, and how much people have enjoyed it. I can't overemphasize to people that don't know the book publishing world. Selling 10,000 books on your own is like the equivalent of me through HarperCollins selling 500,000. I mean, wow. It's a very impressive feat to be able to move 10K on your own without any corporate muscle behind you.
Yeah, that was the first one, so we got to get the second one here too. And being on your show is going to help. I know that.
So thank you, Anthony. Please, everybody, go check it out. I got a copy. I read the second one without reading the first one, so now I got to go back and read the first one. But Lynn, your publicist, was great to get me out that and introduce us. And this was a great time going back into Patriarcha crime family history, Rhode Island State Police history, an epic homicide case that you cracked, and you've done it all. You've said it all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You enjoy the rest of your week. And for Benny behind the glass, I'm Scott Burnstein. For Anthony Pesare, Original Gangsters, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next week. Original Gangsters Podcast, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. I'm out.